Jackson Reed once thought he was the king of Hamilton High until he assaulted a black girl and laughed as if her pain was his entertainment. He had no idea that a forgotten classroom camera was recording every slap, every threat, every moment he thought he was invincible. 5 minutes later, the golden boy was no longer boasting. He knelt and begged for mercy as police showed him the footage of the truth he had sworn never to see. Hamilton High always looked harmless at 7:50 a.m., sunlight pouring through the long glass panels, chatter bouncing off the brick walls, sneakers smacking against the polished floor tiles. To anyone passing by, it was just another normal school morning. But for Talia Moore, it felt like walking into a lion's mouth that already knew the taste of her fear. She rolled her worn blue bike to the rack, chain still clicking from the ride. Her braids were tied neatly, her uniform ironed the night before, every detail of her appearance chosen carefully, because in a place like Hamilton High, being a black girl meant perfection wasn't an option. It was armor. The moment she stepped through the main entrance, the noise changed. Not silence. Silence would have been mercy. It shifted into that sharp, prickling awareness she'd come to recognize too well, stares lingering too long, whispers curling through the air like smoke, bodies slowing just to watch. And then he appeared, Jackson Reed, 6 feet of varsity jacket arrogance, golden boy smirk, and a reputation people were too afraid to question. Behind him, the Viper crew fanned out like obedient shadows, their matching jackets flashing the serpent logo stitched in white thread. They didn't walk through the hallway. They owned it. Jackson blocked Talia's path with the lazy confidence of someone who believed consequences were optional. "Well, look who crawled out of whatever neighborhood that bike came from," he said loudly, making sure his voice carried. Laughter rippled behind him. Talia kept her spine straight. "Move!" Her voice was calm. Too calm for Jackson's liking. He circled her slowly, eyes scanning her like she was merchandise he didn't approve of. "Uniform looks cheap," he said. "Guess the school shouldn't hand out scholarships so easily." More laughter, more eyes, more heat gathering behind her ribcage. Talia held her books tighter. "I said move." Jackson raised an eyebrow, as if amused that she thought she had a say. Then, with a swift kick, he knocked her backpack off her shoulder. It hit the floor with a heavy thud, papers scattering across the tiles in a messy fan. "Oh, no," Jackson said, smirking. "Looks like someone dropped something." He didn't have to say the next part out loud. The Viper crew's snickers filled the blank space. "Get down, pick it up, show them your place." Talia stared at the mess on the floor, the torn worksheet, the homework she stayed up late finishing, the pencil box cracked open. Her jaw tightened, but she forced herself to kneel, hands shaking as she picked up the papers one by one. Behind her, Jackson leaned in close enough for her to smell the mint gum he was chewing. "I warned you last semester," he whispered, voice thick with threat. "Don't let me see you in this hallway again." Before Talia could respond, a soft click echoed from above, too faint for the students to notice, too insignificant for Jackson to care, but important enough to change everything. High on the corner of the ceiling, a brand-new security camera, installed secretly after last month's vandalism scandal, was already recording. It had been on since 7:45, and it captured the kick, the shove, the humiliation, every second of it. Talia didn't know. Jackson didn't know. The Viper crew definitely didn't know, but the truth had already begun writing itself into evidence. Talia rose slowly, her eyes colder than before. She didn't argue. She didn't snap back. She simply stepped past Jackson, holding her backpack against her chest like armor. And that silent act, more defiant than any comeback, made Jackson's smile fade. "I warned you," he said darkly. "Next time won't be so gentle." But what awaited Talia later that day wasn't gentleness. It was the beginning of something far more vicious, something she didn't deserve, but something a camera had already decided would not stay hidden. The history classroom smelled faintly of old textbooks and dry erase markers, a familiar comfort to most students. But not to Talia, not today. Not after the hallway incident that still burned under her skin like a fresh bruise, invisible but throbbing. She slipped into her seat in the third row, laying her notebook flat, hoping, praying that Jackson Reed would choose someone else to torment for the next 50 minutes. But fate in Hamilton High rarely showed mercy. The moment Jackson walked in, tossing his backpack onto the desk behind her, the energy in the room shifted again. He slumped into the chair with all the arrogant weight of someone who knew the world, or at least the school, bent to him. Ms. Monroe, the history teacher, stood at the board scribbling notes, completely oblivious. Or maybe she wasn't oblivious. Maybe she simply chose not to look too closely. After all, why question the golden boy athlete whose father funded half the football stadium? Talia's grip tightened around her pen. The first kick came as a quick tap against her chair. The second was harder, pushing her slightly forward. By the third, her teeth clenched. Jackson leaned forward and whispered just loud enough, "Chair's in my space. Move." Talia didn't move. She raised her hand instead. "Ms. Monroe," she said, steady but strained. "Can I switch seats?" Ms. Monroe didn't even look up from the board. "Seat assignments stay the same, Talia. We've gone over this." Behind her, Jackson smirked. And then he knocked her open notebook off her desk with a casual flick of his sneaker. Papers fluttered to the floor like white feathers drifting into a storm. "Oh, sorry," he said mockingly. "Didn't see it." A few students snickered. Others turned away. Hamilton High was full of experts in pretending they didn't see injustice. Talia bent down to pick up her notes, her braids sliding over her shoulder, jaw locked, refusing to give him the reaction he wanted. But Jackson wasn't done, not even close. He lifted his phone, angled it slightly toward her, and hit record. At first it was harmless, a few seconds of her breathing quietly, flipping pages, tapping her pen on the desk. But then he lowered his voice. "Say something," he whispered. She ignored him. "Fine," he muttered. "I'll say it for you." Jackson played back her earlier hallway words. "Move," then spliced the audio with random curse words he'd recorded from his friends last week. He moved fast, thumbs flying across his screen. Within a minute, he had created a fake audio clip of Talia cursing loudly. He smirked. Then he projected it through the small Bluetooth speaker hidden in his backpack, something he did during football hype sessions, now repurposed for cruelty. The crude, edited voice, her voice, echoed across the classroom. Students turned. Some burst into laughter. Some covered their mouths. Even Ms. Monroe paused, brows furrowing, unsure whether to be annoyed or amused, but Jackson sat back, feigning innocence. "Wow, Talia. Didn't know you talked like that." Heat crawled up her neck. Her chest tightened. The room felt smaller, hotter, crueler. Across the classroom, a boy in the last row, Noah Price, watched everything silently. He wasn't popular, he wasn't loud, he wasn't brave. But he saw the moment Jackson uploaded the audio file into the Viper Crew group chat, saw the laughing emojis, saw the digital fingerprints of the setup. Noah's stomach turned. He should say something. He didn't. Cowards wore many faces, and today his was one of them. Talia exhaled shakily. "Today is only the beginning?" she whispered to herself, barely audible, but the tremor in her voice carried more truth than she realized, because just outside the classroom door, unseen by everyone, something far worse was positioning itself like a shadow waiting to strike. And by the time the bell rang, Talia would learn the hard way that the morning's cruelty was nothing compared to what was coming next. Lunchtime usually meant noise. Chairs scraping, students shouting, the cafeteria buzzing with teenage chaos. But down the East Wing hallway, the history classroom was unnervingly silent, too silent, the kind of silence that felt planned. Talia approached the door slowly, reading the message she'd received minutes earlier. "Come to room 204. Ms. Monroe." Her stomach tightened. Ms. Monroe rarely texted students directly, but she'd been strict earlier. Maybe she wanted to clarify expectations. Maybe she wanted to lecture her about raising her hand, or switching seats, or not disrupting class dynamics. Teachers like her always wrapped dismissal in polite vocabulary. Talia pushed the door open. The lights were off. Sunlight from the tall windows painted long beams across empty desks. No teacher, no papers, no footsteps, just the soft click of the door shutting behind her. She spun around. Jackson Reed stood there, hands still on the lock, that familiar smirk crawling back onto his face. Behind him slid in 3 other members of the Viper crew, Connor, Mason, and Eli, closing ranks like wolves forming a semicircle. "Surprised?" Jackson asked. "Ms. Monroe didn't text you." "I did." He dangled his phone between 2 fingers. The name Ms. Monroe was still glowing on the screen. Her pulse spike hit so hard Talia felt it in her ears. "You need to stop," she whispered. "This isn't funny anymore." Jackson locked the door with a crisp click, letting the key dangle mockingly. "Oh, sweetheart, this stopped being funny a long time ago," he said. "Now it's personal." The boys spread out, blocking the windows, the door, the path to the teacher's desk. Talia stepped back until her shoulders brushed the cold surface of the whiteboard. Connor started first, voice dripping venom. "Why you always acting like you're better than everyone? With your perfect little notes, your perfect answers." Mason snorted. "With your scholarship money, your charity case attitude." Eli leaned against a desk, arms crossed. "Maybe someone needs to teach you how this school really works." Jackson stepped closer and flicked her braid with 2 fingers. "Tell me, Talia, you think your skin makes you special here?" The room spun. Fear rushed through her veins, icy and sharp. She pressed herself harder against the board, fingers trembling around her notebook. Eli snatched it from her hands. Pages ripped loudly as he tore out sheet after sheet. Homework, notes, drawings, letting them fall to the floor in a confetti of destruction. "Oops," he said. "Clumsy me." Connor grabbed a handful of pens from her pencil case and tossed them into her face, one after another. A marker hit her cheek with a dull sting. Jackson didn't flinch. He didn't stop them. He only watched. Then he lifted his phone, pressed a button. A soft beep confirmed he had begun live streaming. "Everyone loves a little entertainment," he said, angling the camera toward her. "Let's show them our guest star." Public humiliation. That was the game. A spectacle. A performance. To them, her pain wasn't real. It was content. The camera light blinked red. "Smile," Jackson mocked. "Say hi." Talia's breath came out shaky, uneven. Tears pooled at the edges of her eyes, threatening to fall. But as the boys laughed, waiting for her to break, something inside her hardened, just enough to keep her spine straight. She planted one hand on the board behind her to stop the trembling. "I'm not crying," she whispered. Her voice cracked, but her words didn't. "I won't cry in front of you." For a moment, only a moment, Jackson froze, thrown off by her defiance. But then his jaw tightened. "You will." He stepped closer. And that was the last full sentence Talia managed to speak before the storm inside that classroom truly began, because the next minute would cross a line no one in Hamilton High could ever pretend not to see again. The clock on the wall blinked 11:47 a.m., its second hand twitching like it was nervous, like even it sensed something was about to snap. The history classroom no longer felt like a room. It felt like a pressure cooker. Talia stood against the board, chest rising and falling in shallow, panicked breaths. Her ripped notebook pages littered the floor, scraped across by the shifting feet of the Viper crew. Desks were crooked, chairs shoved aside. Sunlight through the tall windows cast long, sharp beams across the chaos, making the scene look almost staged, like a set built for a disaster that hadn't happened yet. But then it did, because Jackson Reed finally moved. He didn't shove her this time. He didn't mock her. He didn't wait. He lunged. His hand shot out, gripping her arm so hard her skin burned under his fingers. The impact slammed her back against the board, the markers rattling in their tray from the force. "Now cry," he hissed. Something inside Talia cracked. Not like weakness breaking, but like adrenaline tearing through a barrier she never thought she could cross. Her body reacted before her fear could shut it down. Her knee came up fast. Her foot pivoted. Her heel snapped into the air with a precision she didn't know she still remembered. Her kick landed squarely against Jackson's ribs. The sound he made was somewhere between surprise and pain, a strangled grunt that echoed off the walls. He stumbled backward, crashing into a desk hard enough to knock it over. The metal legs screeched across the floor. A stack of worksheets burst into the air and scattered like startled birds. For one fierce heartbeat, the room froze. Talia stared at him, eyes wide, chest tight. Jackson stared back, hand clutching his side, shock flickering across his face. He hadn't expected that. He hadn't expected her to fight. Not her. Never her. But shock only lasted a second. Then rage filled the space it left. "You little—" he growled, pushing himself upright. He kicked the fallen desk so violently it slammed into another row, sending a chain reaction of clattering metal and collapsing chairs. The whiteboard behind Talia vibrated under his next step forward, and up in the corner, quietly, subtly, the old classroom camera that had been dead for more than a year flickered, just one tiny spark, then another, then the lens glowed red. The school's automated overnight reset had kicked in late for reasons no one would understand until much later, but the result was simple, brutal, and fate-altering. The camera turned on, and it captured everything. Jackson didn't notice. He was too focused on the girl he wanted to break. He charged again. Talia tried to back away, but the board pressed cold against her spine. She raised her arms, instinct kicking in, but his hand caught her shoulder with a force that shook her entire body. "You think you can hit me?" he snarled. "You think you get to fight back?" He shoved her so hard the edge of the board dug into her shoulder blades. Papers spun across the air again, landing in messy piles at their feet. Talia tried to breathe. Just breathe, but the panic was rising, clawing at her throat. She swung at him again, but he blocked it, slamming her wrist against the wall. She gasped. Somewhere behind the panic, a cold truth formed. He wasn't just angry, he was losing control. And that made him dangerous in a way she had never seen. Not in the hallway, not in the classroom, not in the months he'd harassed her. This was different. His eyes weren't mocking anymore. They were wild. Jackson had snapped, and now, in his fury, he was more dangerous than he had ever been. And Talia, trembling against the board, had no way of knowing the next blow he delivered would cross a line no one could ever take back. The classroom looked like a battlefield. Desks overturned, chairs knocked sideways, papers drifting across the tile like ash from a fire that hadn't stopped burning. The whiteboard still quivered from the last slam, its metal tray rattling in uneven shivers. Talia stood in the middle of it all, trembling, breath ragged, eyes glassy with shock. Every muscle in her body screamed for her to run, but her back was still pressed against that same wall, her legs frozen by fear and adrenaline. Jackson closed the distance between them in 3 fast strides. "Talia!" he snarled. "You should have stayed quiet." Then came the hit. The slap cracked through the room like a gunshot. Her head whipped to the side, braids flying. Before the sting could even register, his fist followed, slamming into her stomach, forcing the breath from her lungs in a broken gasp. She folded forward instinctively, arms wrapping around herself. But Jackson grabbed her by the front of her shirt and yanked her up. Her feet barely touched the floor. Her vision blurred in a burst of white. "Fight me again," he spat. "Go on." Talia couldn't. She could barely breathe. He shoved her, hard. Her body crashed sideways into the corner edge of a desk, her temple hitting first, then her shoulder, then the rest of her collapsing like a puppet cut from its strings. The sound was sickening, a dull thud that echoed far too long, and then she didn't move. Not a twitch, not a sound, nothing. Her braids splayed across the tile, her notebooks fluttering to a stop around her like fallen leaves. For the first time, a flicker of fear broke across Jackson's face. "Dude," Mason whispered. "Jackson, she's not getting up." Connor took a step back. "Bro, what did you do?" Eli knelt down and shook her shoulder. "Talia, hey, get up." No response. Her eyelids didn't even flutter. "Oh my God," Mason muttered. "She's unconscious." Panic rippled through the Viper crew like electricity let loose in water. The bravado vanished. The laughter died. The reality of what they'd let happen swallowed them whole. Jackson swore under his breath. Okay, this is fine. We just need to think." "Think?" Connor hissed. "You knocked her out. It was an accident," Jackson barked. "No, it wasn't," Eli whispered. "Not after everything you did." Silence. Heavy, suffocating. Then Connor's voice shook out, thin and desperate. We have to move her. Throw her somewhere. Make it look like she fell down the stairs." Mason nodded frantically. Yes. Nobody will know. If we make it look like—" "No." The word wasn't loud, but it sliced through the room like a blade. The boys froze, because it didn't come from any of them. It came from the doorway. Noah Price stood there, quiet, awkward, invisible Noah, the boy who never spoke unless forced, the boy no one noticed walking through halls, the boy Jackson had never considered a threat, but he stood there now, holding onto the doorframe with trembling hands, eyes wide, not with fear, but with certainty. "I've seen enough." His voice cracked, but his conviction didn't. The Viper crew whipped around, Jackson stepping forward with a glare. "What the hell did you see?" Noah swallowed hard, eyes flicking to Talia's still body on the floor. "Everything," Mason cursed under his breath. Connor's hands began to shake. Eli took another step back as if distance could erase guilt. Jackson narrowed his eyes. "You better not have filmed—" Noah shook his head slowly. "No, I didn't need to." He reached into his pocket. Not for a weapon, not for proof recorded on his own phone, but for something far more dangerous to Jackson Reed, a direct link to the hallway's second camera. And when Noah unlocked his screen, the room went dead silent, because the truth he was about to show them would drag every one of them into a storm far bigger than the one they thought they could stage. Noah Price ran. His footsteps echoed violently down the hallway, hitting the tile with a frantic rhythm that didn't match the usual calm of Hamilton High's lunchtime lull. His breath came out fast and uneven, his palms slick with sweat as he clutched his phone, its screen still glowing with something that could ruin Jackson Reed's world forever. He skidded around the corner, nearly colliding with a cart of stacked textbooks, and reached the door marked "Security. Monitoring room, authorized personnel only." He pushed it open without knocking. Inside, the room buzzed with low hums of machinery and screens. 4 large monitors displaying different hallways, angles, doorways. A middle-aged technician wearing a faded school polo shirt turned in surprise. Hey, you can't just barge. It's an emergency." Noah gasped, slamming his phone onto the desk. "I need footage from the hallway outside room 204, right now." The technician blinked. "What kind of emergency?" Noah's voice cracked. "A girl was hurt, bad, and the people who did it are about to cover it up." That sentence changed the man's face instantly. He leaned forward, expression tightening with concern, and clicked into the school's security interface. "Room 2104, he muttered, scrolling through the camera list. "Okay, hallway camera. Let's take a look." The moment the feed opened, the screen filled with motion. Jackson Reed, visible, unmistakable, dragging Talia Moore's limp, unconscious body by the wrist, her braids trailing behind her like wilted branches, her shoes scraping across the floor. Noah's stomach twisted. Jesus! the technician whispered. Jackson looked around nervously in the footage, checking corners, peeking around the hallway to make sure no one was watching. Then he crouched beside her, shaking her violently as if trying to force her awake, trying to turn the assault into something else, something excusable, something deniable. The other boys hovered nervously behind him, whispering frantic plans. The stairs. Just drop her near the top. Make it look like she fell. She won't remember anything. Their voices bled faintly through the microphone. The technician turned to Noah, horrified. How long has she been unconscious? I don't know, Noah said, throat tightening. But that's not all. There's more in the classroom. The camera turned on again. The technician blinked. That camera's been dead for a year. Noah shook his head. Not anymore. It rebooted, and it recorded everything. The man exhaled sharply, spinning back to the screen. Jackson lifted Talia off the floor, struggling under her weight. Her head lolled lifelessly to the side. The technician winced. "Oh, he is done," the man whispered. "He is absolutely done." He clicked another panel, searching through system logs. And then the real plot twist appeared on the screen, a fresh line of text. Auto sync successful. Hallway camera, cloud storage time. 11:48 access level, system only. Status, cannot delete. Noah stared. So, even if Jackson tries to erase it, he can't, the technician said. No one can. It's already off-site, backed up in the district server. The only way to delete it is with a court order. A tremor of relief hit Noah so hard he had to grip the edge of the table to steady himself. For the first time since he saw Talia go down, he felt the world tilt back, just a little, toward justice. The technician picked up the phone. "I need to report this to the principal right now." Noah grabbed his wrist. His voice steadied, solid, determined. "No, not the principal," he said. "He's Jackson's uncle. He'll bury this." A beat. Noah lifted his chin. "You need to call the police." The technician hesitated. Noah's eyes burned with a courage he didn't know he had. "If you don't," he said quietly, "I'll send this to the press myself." His words hit like a hammer. The technician swallowed hard, because he knew Noah wasn't bluffing. But before he could dial the police, another phone began to ring. Someone else had already seen the footage, and someone far more powerful than Noah or the technician was already moving to expose the truth. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and quiet panic. Machines beeped in steady rhythms beside the bed, each sound carved into Skylar Moore's memory like a wound. She stood frozen at the foot of her daughter's bed, her eyes locked on Talia's still form. Talia looked impossibly small under the thin white hospital blanket. A bruise darkened the left side of her forehead, swelling along her temple. Her lip was split, her cheekbone mottled with purple, and she hadn't opened her eyes since the ambulance brought her in. Skylar's breath trembled as she reached out, brushing a braid away from her daughter's face. Gentle, trembling, afraid to touch too hard, afraid to break her more. "What happened to my baby?" she whispered. Dr. Patel, the attending physician, stood beside her with a clipboard held tight to his chest. His expression was careful, the kind doctors use when they're choosing each word like it might explode. "She suffered a concussion," he said gently. "Significant blunt force trauma to the head. A fall, or something stronger." Skylar's jaw flexed. "A fall." Her voice held no belief, only anger. Dr. Patel hesitated. "The school report says she fell down a stairwell." Skylar turned slowly, eyes sharp as glass. "Does that look like a stairwell fall to you?" The doctor exhaled through his nose. "Off the record? No, it looks like someone hurt her." Her throat tightened. Fury began to bloom. A cold, precise fury she hadn't felt in years, not since cases she wrote about in her old investigative days. She straightened. "I want access to the school's security cameras." The doctor blinked. "You'll have to request that through the principal." "I know," she said, already reaching for her phone. "And I will." Skylar dialed the number for Hamilton High's front office. It rang twice before being picked up, Principal Reed speaking. Skylar didn't waste time. "This is Skylar Moore. My daughter was brought to the hospital unconscious. I'm requesting immediate access to the security footage around room 204 and the east stairwell." A pause. "Too long. Too calculated." "I'm sorry, Ms. Moore," Principal Reed said, voice syrupy with false concern. "We reviewed the cameras. Nothing was captured. It appears she slipped." Skylar's eyes narrowed to slits. "Nothing was captured? Or nothing you want me to see?" "Ms. Moore," he repeated, tone firming, "no footage exists for today's incident." She ended the call without responding. She knew a lie when she heard one, and that was not just a lie. That was a cover-up. Skylar paced the room once, twice, breathing hard through her nose. She had left investigative journalism to raise her daughter, but the instincts, the suspicion, the sharpness, the ability to smell corruption, never left her. She pulled out her phone again, this time opening a private encrypted messaging app she hadn't used in years. One contact was still pinned to the top: Orion. IT specialist, district employee, anonymous whistleblower, a ghost inside Hamilton's digital system. Skylar typed, "I need everything you can pull from room 2104 in the east hallway, now." She waited. 10 seconds, 20, 30. Then a message, a single attachment. "I already saw the live backup. You'll want to sit down." Skylar's chest tightened as she tapped the file. The video opened. There was Talia, her daughter, standing in the classroom, cornered, trembling. Then Jackson Reed stepped into frame. Skylar watched the slap, the punch, the shove, watched Talia's head hit the desk's corner, watched her body collapse, unmoving, onto the tile. Her fingers curled so tightly around her phone that her knuckles split, a thin line of blood sliding down her wrist. Her daughter wasn't just bullied, she was brutalized, and the school tried to bury it. Her heartbeat pulsed like fire, rising up her throat. Skylar Moore wiped the blood from her hand and whispered, "They hurt the wrong girl's child." And she wasn't done, because the next move she made would shake Hamilton High to its core. That night, Hamilton High did not sleep. By 8:15 p.m., the streets outside were quiet, the classrooms dark, the hallways empty. But the internet was on fire, on every phone, in every bedroom, across every group chat. A single notification hit like a match dropped in gasoline. Shadow Witness uploaded a new video. Hamilton High. Brutal assault caught on camera. No one knew who Shadow Witness was. Not yet. Some thought it was a student. Others whispered it was a hacker. A few paranoid parents insisted it had to be police. But all of that became irrelevant the moment they tapped play. The video opened with the silent classroom, empty desks, sunbeams cutting through dust. Then it jumped. Talia Moore, back pressed against the whiteboard, eyes trembling, lips quivering but strong. Jackson Reed, towering over her, jaw clenched, rage pouring off him like heat. The slap hit first, echoing louder than any classroom sound ever should. People gasped, people cursed, people froze. The video didn't cut, it didn't blink, it didn't miss a second. It captured Talia's body folding from the punch, Jackson grabbing her shirt, her head hitting the desk corner, her body collapsing to the floor. Silence followed. Horrifying silence. Then the audio caught the most damning line of the night. Jackson's voice, "Hit her again! No one's gonna know!" And the Viper crew laughing nervously behind him. When the video ended, the comment section ignited like a forest set ablaze. "Expel him now! This is assault! This is attempted murder! Where was the staff? That poor girl, has anyone checked on her? I go to Hamilton High. Everyone knows Jackson gets away with everything. Arrest him!" Skylar Moore watched it happen in real time. She sat at her dining table, laptop open, hands still shaking from the earlier hospital visit. She hadn't uploaded the video herself, not directly, but she knew exactly who had. Her contact, Orion, must have pushed it through a burner account. She didn't stop them. She didn't want to. Within 20 minutes, the video had exploded past local friend circles. Students reposted it, alumni reposted it, Parents reposted it with all-caps captions demanding action. The counter hit 50,000 views in the first half hour. By 9 p.m., it hit 100,000. By 9:10 p.m., local news stations had already picked up the clip. Skylar's phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from reporters, co-workers, activists she hadn't spoken to in years. She ignored them all. Her focus stayed on one thing: justice. Meanwhile, across town, the Reed household was in chaos. Jackson was pacing his bedroom like a trapped animal, hands in his hair, breath ragged as his phone vibrated with notifications, texts from teammates, gossip from students, threats from strangers. Then came the one notification that made his knees buckle. Hamilton PD is now following shadow witness. His voice cracked. Dad, please tell me you can fix this. But even his father, Principal Reed, was silent for once, staring at the TV as multiple news channels replayed his nephew's attack over and over, each station ripping apart the school's failure to protect Talia. The front doorbell rang. Once, twice. A third time, loud enough to shake the windows. Jackson froze. His mother opened the door with trembling hands, and two uniformed police officers stood there. "Is Jackson Reed home?" one asked. His father stepped between them instinctively. "This isn't necessary. We can handle—" "No, sir," the officer said, firm. "You can't." Jackson's heart hammered so loudly he could barely breathe. Because nothing destroys privilege faster than evidence, and tonight the police had seen everything. And when morning came, Hamilton High would wake up to a storm no one could pretend away. The Hamilton Police Department always felt too quiet in the morning. Sterile floors, fluorescent lights humming softly, the low murmur of officers beginning their day. But inside Interview Room 3, the silence felt heavier, thicker, more suffocating than the stale air. At 9:15 a.m., Jackson Reed sat at the metal table, fingers tapping restlessly, jaw clenched so tight it looked wired shut. His once confident posture was gone. He slouched now, eyes darting between the two detectives and the recording camera perched high on the wall. His lawyer, Mr. Hahn, adjusted his tie with an air of annoyance more than concern. He'd already warned Jackson not to speak unless instructed, but Jackson had never been good at listening. Detective Reyes opened the file in front of her. "Jackson, before we begin, you have been informed of your rights?" Mr. Hahn nodded quickly. "He has, and he intends to cooperate fully." Reyes clicked her pen. "Good. Then let's start simple." She leaned forward. "Did you assault Talia Moore yesterday?" Jackson sat up straighter. "No," his voice cracked. "No, I didn't. She fell. She tripped over a desk and hit her head. We tried to help her." Reyes raised one eyebrow. "We?" Jackson swallowed. "Me and the guys, the Viper crew. We didn't do anything wrong." Detective Shaw, the second officer in the room, let out a breath that sounded dangerously close to a laugh. "That's your story?" "It's the truth," Jackson insisted, palms sweating. Reyes shut the folder. "All right," she said calmly. "Let's look at something together." She turned the laptop toward him. The screen lit up, a paused frame of the hallway outside room 204. Jackson's face drained of color. "No," he whispered. "No, that camera doesn't work." "But it did." Reyes pressed play. There he was, dragging Talia's limp body across the hallway. Her arm flopped helplessly. Her shoes scraped against the tiles. Silent, motionless. Jackson let out a strangled breath. "No, this is out of context." But the footage continued. The audio kicked in. Connor's voice. "What do we do? She's out cold." Eli's voice. "This is bad, man. This is really bad." And then Jackson. "Shut up. Nobody says a word about this. Do you hear me?" "Nobody." Another line played, one Noah had heard, but Jackson didn't know was recorded. "If any of you snitch, I swear to God, I'll ruin your lives." Mr. Hahn's hand froze halfway to his briefcase. Detective Shaw folded his arms. "This doesn't look like helping her, Jackson." But there was more. Reyes clicked forward. A second clip loaded. Jackson cornering Noah earlier in the hallway, jabbing a finger into his chest. "If you saw something, you saw nothing." Noah's voice trembled faintly in the background, but it was clear. "Jackson, please don't do this." The footage ended. Silence filled the room. Cold, choking, undeniable. Mr. Hahn's jaw slackened. "Jackson," he whispered, voice tight. "You didn't mention any of this." Jackson slammed his hands on the table. "It's edited. Someone made it look worse." Reyes leaned back. "The files came directly from the district server. You can't edit government-stamped video logs." Shaw closed the laptop. "This isn't roughhousing, and it's not bullying." Reyes finished the sentence, eyes like ice cutting straight through him. "This is premeditated criminal assault." Jackson's breath hitched. For the first time, he looked genuinely terrified. Reyes stood. "We'll continue this shortly. We're waiting on one more update." "What update?" Jackson demanded. A soft knock came at the door. The room turned. Schuyler Moore stepped inside, face pale but fierce, eyes cold with a mother's wrath. Reyes nodded at her. "Miss Moore, we were just reviewing the footage." Schuyler didn't look at Jackson. She didn't need to. Her voice was quiet, but it shook the room. "Detective, she's awake." Jackson's spine snapped straight. "What?" Schuyler finally looked at him. Not angry, not shouting, just steady. "She remembers everything." Because the moment Talia opened her eyes, this stopped being Jackson's story. And before the hour ended, the girl he tried to silence would speak. And the truth would hit harder than any blow he had ever thrown. The recovery room was dim, except for the soft glow of a heart monitor. Its steady beeping was the only sign that the girl lying on the hospital bed was still tethered to the world. When Talia's eyelids fluttered, the room seemed to exhale with her. Schuyler Moore, who had been sitting beside her daughter for hours, jerked upright, hands trembling, eyes red but sharp. "Talia?" Her voice cracked with equal parts hope and fear. Talia blinked slowly, the world around her blurring into shapes and sounds. The ceiling, the fluorescent lights, her mother's silhouette leaning over her, the pain, sharp at her temple, throbbing through her ribs, burning down her throat. "Mom?" Her voice was dry, barely a whisper. "Oh, sweetheart." Schuyler cupped her daughter's face gently, fighting tears. "You're safe now. You're safe." But the tremble running through Talia's body said otherwise. Two detectives entered quietly, Reyes and Shaw, standing near the foot of the bed with solemn expressions. They didn't step too close. They didn't raise their voices. They simply waited. They knew Talia would speak when she was ready. It took nearly a full minute before she found her voice. Where is he?" she whispered, eyes darting nervously. "He's in custody," Schuyler said firmly, "and he's not getting out." Talia's breaths were shallow, her throat tight with memory. She closed her eyes for a second, 1 second, and the images flooded back. The slap, the punch, the desk corner, the cold tile. Jackson's voice, mocking, furious, unhinged, and something else, something worse. She opened her eyes, jaw trembling. I need to tell you something." Schuyler nodded gently. "Take your time." But Talia didn't want time. She didn't want a pause. She wanted the truth out of her body before it crushed her from the inside. "He didn't just hit me," she whispered, eyes filling. "He tried to choke me." The room went still. Reyes stepped forward slowly. "Talia, can you tell us exactly what he did?" Talia swallowed, hands shaking under the blanket. "He grabbed my neck. Here." She lifted her fingers to the side of her throat, to the tender skin still bruised with faint fingerprint marks. "He squeezed hard. I couldn't breathe." Shaw's face hardened. "How long did he choke you?" "I don't know," she said, voice cracking. "Long enough to make everything go blurry, long enough for me to think I wasn't going to get up again." Schuyler covered her mouth, eyes filling with horror. Reyes's pen stopped mid-note. "Talia, this wasn't in the footage." Talia nodded weakly. "He did it before he shoved me, before my head hit the desk." Her breathing quickened, panic tightening her chest. Schuyler stroked her hair gently, grounding her. Detective Reyes exchanged a look with Shaw, one that changed everything. Assault was one thing, but choking? Cutting breath from a victim? Rendering them unconscious by force? The law didn't call that bullying. It called it something far more serious. Reyes stepped closer, voice calm but unmistakably urgent. "Talia, what you just told us changes the entire case." Schuyler looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "It means," Reyes said, "that this wasn't just assault. This wasn't a fight or an accident." She lifted her notebook. "It qualifies as attempted murder." Schuyler's breath hitched. Talia went still. Even the heart monitor beeped louder, as if reacting to the word attempted murder. The detectives allowed the weight of the term to settle. Reyes continued, "We will be upgrading the charges. The district attorney will receive this information immediately. This case is moving to court. Fast." Schuyler took her daughter's hand. "You're going to get justice, baby. Every bit of it." Talia exhaled shakily, tears slipping down her temples. I just didn't want to die in that classroom." "You won't," Schuyler whispered fiercely. "Not ever again." Within the hour, the case file was on the district attorney's desk, with "attempted murder" stamped in red across the top. And as news spread, Hamilton High didn't just become a school anymore. It became the epicenter of a storm no one in the district could escape. The courthouse parking lot was overflowing by 8 a.m. News vans lined the street, microphones and cameras pointed toward the entrance like predators waiting for movement. Parents from Hamilton High stood in clusters, whispering, clutching coffee cups they hadn't touched. Students gathered too, some holding their phones high, streaming live updates. But inside courtroom 4B, the atmosphere felt colder, thicker. Every seat was filled. Every breath was held. At the center of it all sat Jackson Reed. He looked nothing like the untouchable bully who ruled Hamilton High's hallways. His once perfect hair was disheveled, his tan varsity jacket replaced with a stiff button-down shirt that looked too big, too formal, too wrong on him. His eyes darted nervously from the judge to the prosecutor to the crowded gallery, where Schuyler Moore sat rigidly, hands clasped so tightly the knuckles whitened. Noah Price sat beside her, shoulders tense, guilt etched across his face. He hadn't slept since the assault. Not since he realized his silence might have helped this happen. Today, he was determined not to stay silent again. The bailiff called the room to order. "All rise for Judge Hargrove." Everyone stood. The judge entered, stern and unreadable. The trial began. The prosecutor stepped forward, a tall woman with a voice sharp enough to cut steel. She began by laying out the timeline. The harassment, the assault, the cover-up attempt, the hospital findings, the upgraded charge of attempted murder. She paced slowly, deliberately, letting the weight of each detail sink deep into the courtroom walls. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "this was not a scuffle between students. This was not a moment of poor judgment. This was a violent, deliberate attack on a 16-year-old girl, an attack that would have killed her if she had not received immediate medical care." Jackson squirmed in his seat. When his lawyer rose to respond, he tried a desperate pivot. "Your Honor," Mr. Hahn said, "my client was influenced by the older members of the Viper crew. They pressured him. They escalated the situation. He panicked. He never intended to harm Miss Moore, let alone attempt to kill her." Whispers rippled through the gallery. Jackson stared at the floor, jaw trembling. Then came the moment no one could escape. The prosecutor turned toward the screen behind her. "Let's review the hallway footage," she said. In full, the lights dimmed. The video played. Jackson dragging Talia's limp body. Jackson threatening his friends. Jackson cornering Noah. Jackson saying, "If you snitch, I'll ruin your life." Even Jackson's parents flinched. When the classroom footage appeared, the room fell into a silence so suffocating it felt like the air stagnated. The slap, the punch, the blow to her head, the collapse. And then, the moment she didn't move, the courtroom didn't gasp. It didn't murmur. It froze. Even the judge leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing with something between anger and disbelief. Schuyler pressed a hand to her mouth, tears gathering but refusing to fall. Noah's eyes burned. Jackson's shoulders shook. When the lights rose again, no one made a sound. Judge Hargrove's voice finally broke the silence. "This case is no longer about school discipline. This is about criminal accountability." And as the judge scheduled the next phase of the trial, Jackson's composure cracked. His fall had finally begun. The holding cell was colder than Jackson expected. Not physically, though the metal bench beneath him was unforgiving, but in atmosphere. Silence pressed down like a weight. His once steady hands shook uncontrollably. His breath came shallow, uneven. He wasn't Jackson Reed, king of Hamilton High, anymore. He was inmate 4736, awaiting judgment. His lawyer, Mr. Hahn, stood on the other side of the bars with a face twisted in frustration. Not pity, not sympathy, pure, exhausted frustration. "Jackson," he said, adjusting his glasses sharply, "is there anything at all you haven't told me? Because right now the evidence is overwhelming, and your denials aren't helping." Jackson swallowed, throat tight and dry. He stared at the floor. "There might be more," he whispered. Hahn blinked. "More what?" Jackson didn't look up. "More videos." The lawyer stiffened. "Of the assault?" "No," Jackson breathed out, voice cracking. "From before, other kids, other days, stuff that I deleted." Hahn froze. "Deleted? You mean you recorded yourself hurting other students?" Jackson nodded slowly. Shame and fear twisted his face until he looked almost unrecognizable. "Some we scared, some we shoved. One kid got a nosebleed. We laughed. I thought it was funny back then." "And you recorded all of it?" Hahn demanded. Jackson hesitated, then nodded again. "But I deleted them months ago." A beat of silence passed, a heavy, irreversible beat. Hahn exhaled a low, bitter laugh. "Jackson, are you trying to destroy your own defense?" "I didn't know it would come to this," Jackson whispered. I didn't know she'd pass out." "That doesn't matter," Hahn snapped. "Deleting evidence of prior assaults is obstruction. It shows pattern. It shows intent. It destroys any argument we had for momentary lapse or peer pressure." Jackson felt his chest tighten further. "So, what do I do now?" Hahn spun, grabbing his briefcase. "I'm withdrawing from this case. I cannot ethically defend you if you've lied about the extent of your behavior." Jackson's heart plummeted. "You can't leave me." "Watch me," Hahn said coldly. "You weren't honest. You weren't cooperative. And now you're radioactive." He walked away without looking back. Jackson collapsed onto the bench, head buried in his hands. His breathing hitched in ugly, uneven gasps. He was shaking so violently that the metal chain on his cuffs rattled. 15 minutes later, officers escorted him back to the courtroom. His parents were waiting there. His mother's mascara streaked down her face. His father's jaw was clenched so hard it looked like it might crack. "How could you hide this from us?" his father hissed. "The news is reporting you've done this before, multiple times." "It wasn't like that," Jackson cried. "Dad, please." His father stepped back. "Don't call me that right now." Cameras flashed from the gallery. Reporters whispered, taking notes as the Reed family fractured in front of them. Headlines were already forming before their eyes. Hamilton athlete linked to multiple bullying incidents. Deleted videos suggest pattern of abuse. Principal's nephew accused of obstruction. His world wasn't just crumbling, it was being televised. The prosecutor approached his holding area, voice calm but slicing. "Your lawyer quit. Your parents are distancing themselves, and new witnesses have come forward. If you want even a fraction of leniency, now is the time." Jackson's breathing steadied. "Barely." He lifted his head. "I'll plead," he whispered. "I'll plead guilty." The prosecutor nodded once. It was the first choice Jackson made all day that wasn't a lie, and it marked the end of everything he once was. And the very next morning, the judge would turn that confession into a sentence that echoed through the entire district. The final day of sentencing drew a crowd so large that courtroom 4B couldn't contain it. Students in Hamilton High uniforms filled the gallery seats, their backpacks piled by the door. Parents stood shoulder to shoulder with reporters, whispering anxiously as cameras clicked like insects in the glow of courtroom lights. A sense of history hung in the air, and fear and anticipation. Because today, Jackson Reed, once the untouchable golden boy of Hamilton High, would face consequences no amount of privilege could soften. When the bailiff called the room to order, everyone rose. Judge Hargrove entered with the same sternness she'd shown from the very first hearing, but today her stride felt heavier. Final. Jackson was escorted in next. He walked like a man already broken. His hands trembled in cuffed wrists. His eyes were red, whether from sleepless nights or from the pressure of the dozens of cameras aimed at him. No one could tell. His mother sobbed quietly. His father stared straight ahead, face blank with humiliation and exhaustion. Schuyler Moore sat with her arms crossed tightly, jaw set. Noah sat beside her, swallowing hard, still carrying the weight of his early silence, but standing firm in the truth now. The prosecutor rose. "Your Honor, the state requests sentencing for the following charges: assault in the first degree, attempted murder, obstruction of justice, tampering with evidence, intimidation of witnesses." Gasps erupted around the courtroom. Even those who had followed the case closely seemed shaken hearing the full list out loud. Jackson's lawyer, his new court-appointed one, stood with a resignation that suggested he already knew the outcome. "Your Honor, my client has entered a guilty plea and expresses deep remorse." Judge Hargrove held up a hand. "I have reviewed his plea." She turned her gaze to Jackson. "Mr. Reed, do you wish to address the court?" Jackson swallowed, stepping forward to the podium. The microphone amplified the tremble in his voice. I'm sorry," he choked out. "To Talia, to her family, to the school. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I wasn't thinking. I was stupid. I was angry. I didn't—" His voice cracked. "I didn't want to kill her." Schuyler's jaw tightened. Noah looked away. Jackson sucked in a shuddering breath. "I know I deserve to be punished. I just want to say I'm sorry." Silence swept through the courtroom like a cold wind. Judge Hargrove folded her hands. "Remorse is noted, Mr. Reed," she said, "but remorse does not erase the harm you caused, the life you endangered, nor the deliberate choices you made before, during, and after the assault." She lifted the sentencing documents. "Therefore it is the judgment of this court that you be sentenced to 15 years in state prison, with eligibility for parole only after serving 10. The room erupted. Some gasped, some cried, some whispered prayers of relief. Jackson collapsed into his chair, sobbing openly. His mother wailed. His father covered his face with both hands. Reporters instantly shouted questions as security moved in to control the chaos. Schuyler didn't move. She didn't blink. She simply exhaled, a long, trembling release of a breath she'd been holding since the moment her daughter hit the classroom floor. The judge banged her gavel. "Court dismissed." But as the officers led Jackson away, the prosecutor turned to Schuyler with a grave expression. "The case isn't over," she said quietly. "We've opened a new investigation, because what came next would drag the entire Viper crew under the same unforgiving light. And Hamilton High's darkest secrets were only beginning to surface." 1 month later, Hamilton High did not look like the same school. The banners hanging across the courtyard read, "Anti-Bullying Awareness Week," in bold navy letters. Booths were set up near the gym with counselors, student leaders, and volunteers handing out pamphlets about reporting abuse, protecting vulnerable students, and recognizing early signs of harassment. Cameras from local news outlets filmed every corner, capturing the school's attempt to rebuild its shattered reputation. But beneath the glossy posters and the polished speeches, something deeper was shifting, something raw, painful and necessary. Students walked through the halls more quietly now. Bullies kept their heads down. Teachers paid closer attention. Every conversation, every sidelong glance, every whisper was weighed differently, because after what happened to Talia, the school finally understood how quickly silence could become violence. Talia arrived that morning with her mother by her side. Her bruises had faded into faint shadows, her stitches removed, but the memory of that classroom still flickered behind her eyes. A month wasn't long enough to heal, but she was standing, walking, moving forward, and Noah Price stood waiting for her at the entrance. "Hey," he said awkwardly, shifting his backpack strap. Talia offered a small smile. "Hey." Schuyler nodded warmly to him before joining a small group of faculty, including Hamilton High's new interim principal, Ms. Amina Clark, a woman with fierce poise and a voice that struck a perfect balance between compassion and authority. "Thank you for coming, Talia," Ms. Clark said. "Your presence today means more than you know." Before Talia could respond, Noah cleared his throat, nervous energy trembling through him. "There's something I need to tell you both," he said. Schuyler frowned gently. "What is it?" Noah swallowed hard. Then he pulled out a USB drive. "This isn't the only video," he whispered. Talia's breath caught. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. Noah looked around, making sure no one else was listening. "Before the attack, Jackson filmed other students, younger ones, quiet ones, kids who couldn't fight back. Stuff he did in the gym, in the locker rooms, the parking lot. I found the files on an old shared drive the Viper crew used to dare each other." Schuyler's eyes widened. "Why didn't you bring this sooner?" "I was scared," Noah admitted, voice shaking. "Back then, I didn't want to be involved. I didn't want to be next. But now, after what happened to Talia, after everything she survived, I can't stay quiet anymore." He held out the USB like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "This needs to be seen." Ms. Clark took it solemnly, nodding with a gravity that said she understood exactly what this meant. "These videos will be handed directly to the district and the police," she said. "Your courage matters, Noah. You're helping expose a system that should have been stopped years ago." Noah exhaled shakily, relief and guilt tangled together. Talia touched his arm lightly. "Thank you," she said, "for not staying silent this time." The courtyard loudspeakers crackled to life. "Students and staff, please take your seats. Our next speaker will be Talia Moore." She froze. Schuyler squeezed her hand. "You can do this." Noah nodded. "Everyone needs to hear you, because today wasn't just about her story. It was about exposing years of hidden cruelty embedded in the school's walls." And as she stepped toward the stage, the crowd fell silent, waiting for the girl who survived to finally speak her truth. The sun hung high over Hamilton High's courtyard, casting warm gold across the assembled crowd. Every bench, every patch of grass, every walkway was filled. Students stood shoulder to shoulder. Teachers lined the railings. Reporters formed a tight perimeter near the back. Cameras raised, microphones poised. A hush rippled through the air as Principal Clark stepped to the podium. "Today," she said, "we honor a student who survived what no child should ever endure, and who chose courage over silence." Then she looked toward the front row. "Talia Moore, the stage is yours." A wave of murmurs broke out as Talia rose to her feet. Her hands trembled slightly, but her steps were steady. When she climbed the stage and turned toward the sea of faces, hundreds of eyes locked onto her, waiting, hoping, bracing. For a moment, she just breathed. The microphone waited. The school held its breath. "My name is Talia," she began softly. "A month ago, I didn't know if I would ever stand again, let alone stand here." The crowd tightened with emotion. She continued, stronger now. "I was scared. I was hurt. And I was made to feel like my voice didn't matter. Like what happened to me was something I should get over, something I should stay quiet about." Her gaze swept across the courtyard, at the students who once looked away, the teachers who hadn't noticed, the reporters who had now turned the school into a spotlight. "But the truth is," she said, "silence didn't save me. People did, people who finally spoke. People who finally cared. People who decided that pretending not to see was no longer an option." Schuyler watched from the front row, eyes shining with tears she refused to let fall. Noah stood beside her, his fists clenched, not from fear this time, but from conviction. Talia pressed a hand to her heart. "I'm alive today because someone refused to stay silent, because evidence, real evidence, spoke when I couldn't. And because justice finally chose the right side," a few students sniffed, wiping their faces. The courtyard shifted with emotion, raw and unfiltered. Talia's voice grew steadier. "So, I'm asking all of you, don't be bystanders. Don't be watchers. If you see someone hurting, say something. If you see someone being humiliated, step in. If you see injustice, record it, report it, expose it." She drew in a breath, grounding herself. "This school is changing, but it won't be posters or speeches that change it. It'll be you." Dozens of students nodded. A few cried openly now. "And to anyone who has ever been made to feel small or silent," she added, "I want you to know you are not alone. You never were." Her final words landed like a vow. "I didn't choose what happened to me, but I choose what happens next." Thunderous applause broke out, but just before it reached full volume, every phone in the audience buzzed simultaneously. A new notification from Shadow Witness, a final post. The giant courtyard screen lit up with the message in white text against a black background. "Justice doesn't come from violence. It comes from the cameras bullies think they outrun." Gasps, whispers, goosebumps rippling through the crowd. Then applause erupted, louder than anything Hamilton High had ever heard. Students stood, teachers stood, even reporters stood. The entire school rose to their feet for the girl who refused to break, applauding not just survival, but truth. And if you want it, this world is ready for a new season, a new villain, a new storm, because Hamilton High has many more stories waiting to be told. And just like that, the bully who thought he ran Hamilton High learned the one lesson he never expected. When you attack a black girl and hide behind privilege, the truth will find you, especially when the camera you ignored becomes the witness you can't silence. Talia walked out stronger. Jackson walked out in handcuffs. And the school finally realized that silence is what protects bullies, but evidence is what buries them. Now tell me, what part of this story shocked you the most? If you want more stories that hit just as hard, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.